The sun was hot on the airport runway, making everything outside the plane look blurry like waves. Inside Flight 732, people were finding their seats, putting bags away, and getting ready to fly. But in seat 16A, an old man named Clyde Harrison, 84 years old, sat quietly by the window, not moving, not saying anything. He wore an old tweed jacket and soft brown pants. His shoes were worn out but clean, and his pale blue eyes stared out at the ground crew like he was watching something important. A flight attendant named Brenda came up to him, polite but sharp, and said, "Sir, are you sure you're in the right seat?" He didn't answer at first. She asked again, louder, and nearby a man in a fancy suit, Marcus, let out a loud sigh. He looked annoyed, like Clyde was holding everything up. Clyde finally turned his head and said, "Seat 16A, that's what the ticket says." Brenda frowned and asked to see his boarding pass, thinking maybe he was lost or confused. Marcus rolled his eyes and said loudly, "Just check the ticket already. Some of us have real places to be." Clyde slowly pulled a folded ticket from his pocket, with hands that were old but steady, and gave it to her. She read it. It was correct. He was in the right seat, but her face showed she still didn't believe he belonged in business class. "Okay," she said. "Everything looks fine," but her voice sounded like she was still unsure. Clyde gave a small nod and turned back to the window. He had no carry-on, no phone, nothing but what was in his jacket. Marcus muttered again, "Unbelievable. They let anyone up here now." He thought Clyde looked too poor to sit in business class. Brenda looked at him like she agreed. A few minutes later, Brenda returned, this time with her supervisor, Carol, a woman with sharp eyes and a stiff walk. Brenda said softly, "This is the man I told you about." Carol looked Clyde up and down and asked, "Sir, do you feel okay today? Do you know where you're going?" Her tone was slow, like she thought Clyde was confused or sick. Clyde looked up and said calmly, "I'm going to San Diego. My ticket says that." But Marcus jumped in again, smiling like he was being helpful, and said, "Maybe he's just confused. Happens to my grandfather too. Just move him to the back and we can all go." A few people nearby nodded. They were annoyed now. Clyde wasn't shouting, wasn't causing trouble, but to them he was a delay. Carol folded her arms and said, "We can remove any passenger who disturbs others. Some people are uncomfortable now." Clyde didn't argue. He touched the leather band on his wrist, old, worn, just a strip of brown leather, and said nothing. Marcus sneered. "What is that thing? He's probably had it on since the war." Clyde didn't answer, but in his mind he was back in Vietnam. A young pilot named Danny Deacon Miller had handed him that same leather strap on a loud airfield and said, "So you remember which way is up. Bring us home, Spectre." That was Clyde's call sign back then, Spectre. Danny never made it home. Clyde had worn that wristband every day since. Now the flight captain, Evans, was called to the front. Carol and Brenda told him Clyde was maybe confused, maybe a problem. Marcus joined in, saying they needed to take off, and Clyde was in the way. The back of the plane, a young man named Ben watched the whole thing. He was a fan of airplanes flying to a show, and something about Clyde, how calm he was, how quiet, felt different. Ben pulled out his phone and texted his friend Jake, an air traffic controller. "Can you look up a man named Clyde Harrison? He's old. They're trying to kick him off the plane. I think he said something like Spectre, and he's wearing a leather wristband. Just check fast." Jake got the text and searched Clyde's name. At first, nothing special came up, but then he searched Spectre and everything changed. The computer flashed red. A file popped up with high-level military clearance, stuff Jake wasn't even allowed to see. His boss, a serious former colonel, saw it and turned pale. "Get JFK Tower on the line. Hold that plane, now. On the plane, Clyde had started to unbuckle his seatbelt. He was going to leave without a fight. He'd been through worse. But just before he stood, the cockpit door opened fast. The co-pilot rushed out, his face pale. "Captain, it's NORAD," he whispered. "They want to speak to you." "About Spectre." The cabin went silent. NORAD? That was the U.S. military's top defense command. What was going on? Captain Evans rushed into the cockpit. A few minutes later, he came back, his face totally changed. He looked shocked, nervous. He walked slowly down the aisle, right to Clyde. He looked him in the eye and said, "Colonel Harrison, sir, I'm deeply sorry. We made a terrible mistake." Then he picked up the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice shaking, "there has been a delay due to our failure to recognize a true American hero on board. Sitting in 16A is retired Air Force Colonel Clyde Harrison, known in the military as Spectre. He flew 250 missions. He received the Silver Star, the Air Force Cross, and more medals than I can list. His name is known and respected across the world." The cabin was silent. Then from outside, a loud, low sound filled the air. People looked out their windows. 2 fighter jets, F-35s, flew up alongside the plane, one on each wing. Everyone gasped. On Clyde's side, the pilot of one jet turned his head and saluted. A voice came through the plane speakers. "It's an honor to fly with you today, Spectre. The skies are yours." The whole plane started clapping, cheering. People stood up. Phones recorded everything. Marcus looked pale and sick. Brenda leaned against the wall, hiding her face. The jet escort stayed beside the plane as it took off, then peeled away in the sky. Captain Evans walked down the aisle again. He stopped at Brenda and Marcus. To Brenda, he said, "Your behavior was a shame to your uniform. You'll be reviewed when we land." To Marcus, he said, "You judged a man by his clothes. Think about what that says about you." Then he knelt by Clyde's seat again. "Colonel, I can't say sorry enough." Clyde looked at him and gave a tired smile. "It's okay, son," he said softly. "People see an old man and forget what we've been through. But that's not their fault. You just remember that this uniform means you serve everyone in that cabin, not just the ones who look important." He looked out the window again. He thought of Danny Miller, and the day he died in a burning crash. Danny had pulled the leather band from his own wrist and said, "Wear it for both of us. Bring us home." And Clyde had worn it ever since. By the time the plane landed in San Diego, videos of the flight were already everywhere. Social media blew up. News channels played clips of the escort jets and the captain's speech. The airline made a public apology. Brenda and Carol were suspended. Marcus's company put out a statement saying they didn't support what he did. He was put on leave. A few weeks later, Clyde was at his favorite diner near home, just sipping coffee, reading the paper. Then Brenda walked in. She wasn't in uniform. She wore jeans and no makeup. She looked nervous. "Colonel Harrison," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. I needed to tell you in person. What I did was wrong. I'm in the new training program. I'm trying to be better." Clyde looked up, then motioned for her to sit. She did. He didn't scold her. Instead, he told her a story. About Danny, about the war, about what it means to carry someone's memory. When he finished, she had tears in her eyes. He pushed the napkin holder toward her and said, "Forgiveness is the first step. For you and for me." She left, lighter. He stayed, sipping his coffee. Outside, high above, a jet flew across the sky, leaving a white trail. Clyde watched it disappear into the blue and smiled. Because sometimes the quiet heroes walk among us and we don't even know, until the sky salutes them.